Welcome. My name is Gordon Flake. I'm the CEO of the Perth USAsia Center, and today it's my great honor to have an online conversation with one of our 2022 Indo-Pacific Fellows, Mr. Thai Binh. As is probably obvious from his name, he's from Vietnam, and we've been very fortunate over the course of this year to benefit from his insights, his writings, and from his on-the-ground perspective from Vietnam. Today, we thought we would share that more broadly with our community by this video interview. So, Thai Binh, thank you so much for your time today.
Good morning, Dr. Gordon, and thank you. And good morning to the audience of Perth USAsia Center. And I'm very proud to be a fellow of the program. And I hope that my on-the-ground insight can help to strengthen the friendship between Vietnam and Australia, especially that next year will be our 50th anniversary of Vietnam and Australia relations, and we're looking forward to a lot of things happen.
Well, perfect timing. You know, you've had a great career. You were earlier an investment promotion specialist for Bà Địa Vũng Tàu province. Obviously, the state of Western Australia has a sister state relationship or a memorandum of understanding between Western Australia and BVRT, and you were very important in that role. But you've since moved on. You're working as the CEO of Survival Skills Vietnam, which focuses on public health and safety through first aid education, a very different career path. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your background, kind of where you're from, your education, and your career background that brought you to the point where you are right now?
Okay. Yeah, actually, like I start with a Bachelor of Commerce, but like I always see myself as a change maker. So, I want to deliver positive impact to the society, whether it's big or small, and it doesn't matter what kind of career I take. So when I was a university student, I really worked on the climate change 10 years ago. At that time in Vietnam, people have no idea about climate change. They talk about climate change as pick up the trash and put into the trash bin. It's all people know about climate change. And then actually like my career, I start my career thanks to Australia, because like at that time when I get my master degree in Australia, and I happened to study a course about business sustainability, and I did an essay on a research on the tax regulation of Australia on the development of green sectors. And then, that course helped me understand that the problem we were facing, we tried to fix, was actually the aftermath of poor public governance. So, we may have really beautiful policy, but we fail to implement that perfectly. Therefore, I believe that if I can contribute to Vietnam, regulation and implementation of those regulation, I can stop the problem from beginning instead of waiting it to happen, and then we try to fix it through the civil societies. And that exactly what I did in 5 years in the government. So we leveraged international cooperation to learn the environment regulation from overseas to implement in Vietnam. We have good investor to get in Vietnam. We create job and we enhance the education locally. So I really like what I did there. The reason why I changed to public health was simply because like I happened to attend a first aid course. It was delivered by Tony Coffey, a paramedic from Sydney. He happened to travel to Vietnam, and he realized that there are a lot of people dies because of nobody know how to help. So I realized the importance of first aid, and I myself got into a lot of terrible accident in the past. I should be dead several times already, but I was really lucky that my mom was a nurse. She knew first aid and she saved me. So I'm still alive until today. So I really see the importance of first aid personally. So, at that time I think like, okay, I complete my project in the government, and I think like I need some fresh change. And, so at that time, the Survival School Vietnam is just losing money, because like in Vietnam, nobody care about first aid. And, Australia or developed country, they don't believe that this problem happened in Vietnam or developing countries. So, we have to use our own pocket money. And then we run out of money. So I joined and turn it into an enterprise. So we we provide the premium service to the companies, and we raise fund to invest in the communities to raise awareness about first aid. And until now, the approach have like more than 90,000 Vietnamese people get first aid education, and they save plenty of thousand people. So I think like, yeah, it's a good chance to go.
Well, thank you. That's extremely impressive. Please convey our thanks to your mother, not only for bringing you into the world, but for keeping you in the world, keeping you alive, and sure the work that you're doing right now, continue it. So you were born in Vung Tau? Are you born in?
Yes.
Is that where you're from?
Yes,
and,
I was born
and where did you study in Australia?
I graduated in RMIT Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City, and then I went to Australia for University of Queensland for the master degree.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah. Now, before we go on with other items of the conversation, I think that even though Perth is an oceanside town, Vung Tau is an oceanside town, you and I both have some ties with the mountains of Montana. Tell me about your ties to Montana.
Well, it's a very interesting question. That actually my first time go to America. And the reason I went to Montana, because like when I started social enterprise, there was no case study in Vietnam. And it was completely new concept in the world. So usually when I face with unfamiliar matters, I look up on Google and I find an answer. But this thing is totally new. I cannot find answer on Google. So I got a scholarship from the State Department of America to go to America, to Montana, to learn what people do there, to use the entrepreneurship to try to fix the social problem. And I'm really enjoying that. People in Montana are really kind. And it's very vast. You know, the one funny thing I say, like I told people in Montana that I was born in Vũng Tàu. This is a very small city in Vietnam with only 1 million people. And the Montana people were surprised because the whole state have only 1 million people. And
not even 1 million people. No, I remember our earlier conversation on that, and it is a strange world where we both cross paths in that relatively isolated, landlocked Western state. But it is a beautiful state, and so I'm glad you've had the opportunity to see that part of the world.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about health innovation, given the sector you're working in right now. Obviously, during the pandemic, Vietnam saw a lot of kind of grassroots, bottom-up led approaches and innovations that were very helpful. In fact, that probably best characterized the Vietnamese response. It wasn't all just top down, but kind of bottom up. I'm curious as to your views of the importance of organizations like your own, innovation more broadly in the health sector, and innovation in Vietnamese economy more broadly.
Yes, I think like health innovation is a very big topic. I will limit my answer to the field I'm working on in the public health and safety and first aid education. Actually, the bottom left approach can be brought about when people recognize the cross-sector collaboration. That's the most notable change I see when the pandemic happened. Like for example, like with the first aid matter, like before the pandemic, the Vietnamese people believe first aid was to be done by doctors only, and when emergency happened, they totally rely on ambulance service. This is take a comparison. I heard that in Australia, when someone got an accident, like 7 out of 10 people can know how to do CPR or basic first aid skill. In Vietnam, the percentage is less than 5%. And 5% people did something, but they did incorrectly, which getting worse. And 90% know nothing to do in that scenario. And to make the matter worse, the doctor believe that is their job to do. Nobody should do that. Well, whereas like in Australia or in many places in the world, first aid are designed to be done by lay people. But in Vietnam, people don't have that concept, and we don't even have a definition for first aid. We don't have a consistent definition for first aid. That makes the matter worse. And only a few quite progressive medical professionals recognize that what we did actually make things easier for them. Because if the victim dies before getting to hospital, it doesn't matter how good they are. The victim dies anyway. And actually things changed when the pandemic happened. You know, the healthcare system of Vietnam already stretched out before the pandemic. Just imagine, like Vietnam have 5 times the population of Australia with less hospital. So the hospital are always crowded. If you have a chance to visit a state hospital in Vietnam, you will see like people, you will see of people, and sometimes people have to, you know, to stay on a bed, backup bed on a balcony because there is not enough bed even in normal condition. Not to mention the pandemic, and the pandemic is even challenging for Australia. You know, you have less population, you have more doctors, the personal distance of you of Australia are very big, and the house in Australia, you know, is like have a lot of distance from each other. If you go to Ho Chi Minh City, you see like everyone live next to each other, and the street full of people. So, and Australia, you know, you say you are a landlocked continent, so it's harder for Vietnam to control the pandemic without the collaboration of many people. Therefore, like people start relying on the non-medical professional to fill the gap in the healthcare system. We don't have enough doctor or nurse. Even like we even a medical student join with the movement, but there's not enough people to do that. Um, Therefore, like we immobilize, like the health ministry immobilize everyone to involve, even celebrity, and even social media and everything to involve in that. So people rely on the people to take good care of themselves, doing best practice, and mobilize the business, the volunteers, and anyone that can help to join with managing the pandemic. And you know, and the same apply for first aid. Recently, when Survival Skill Vietnam like celebrate our 8 years anniversary, the representative of health department of Ho Chi Minh City visit, and he's have a speech that they really need a stronger community network to have early intervention. So now they see the importance of early intervention rather than people get to hospital and the hospital have to take care of them, and they need us as the extended arm of the healthcare system as well, because like they recognize that without people who know to do first aid in the community, it doesn't matter how modern the facilities are, how good the doctors are, the golden time of the victim is already wasted. I think like those things is taken for granted in Australia. It's a really normal concept in Australia, but it takes years for people to recognize, and it will take more years from now to implement those ideas.
Well, thank you. One, for your efforts, and for explaining to us. I mean, this is at the heart of the best of international relations, where we travel the world, we try to learn best practices, and we apply them to make the lives of our neighbors and our friends better in that regard. You've made me wonder as to whether or not I fit in the 70% of Australians who know what to do in terms of first aid. I think I had some first aid classes as a teenager, but I'm afraid that I'm not overly current. I might have to take your classes in Vietnam.
You're welcome.
Hey, let's turn back to your previous position. I think you know, and I mentioned at the outset, that the state government of Western Australia has a memorandum of understanding with Vung Tau. And early on, as one of our 2022 Indo-Pacific Fellows, you kindly wrote an excellent report, one of our Indo-Pacific analysis briefs, which we'll make sure that there's a link to that brief in the description of this video below, that looked at the investment opportunities in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu province and Vung Tau city itself as one of Vietnam's kind of fastest growing provinces. I wonder if you might just give our audience a little bit of a sense about what makes Vung Tau such an attractive destination for foreign investment, particularly to Australian businesses.
I think like firstly, I think like to sum up, like Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu advantage come from the synergy of two very special advantage. First is the location and logistics. The second is manufacturing infrastructure. And firstly, talking about the location and logistics, Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu is very close to Ho Chi Minh City, the heart of Vietnam economies. And Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, Ho Chi Minh City, and the surrounding province form an economic hub. We call it Southern Key Economic Zone. And this single economic zone only occupies less than 10% of Vietnam area, but contribute to more than 40% of the economy of Vietnam. So you see the importance of this small region, and in the Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu proximity, there are the international seaport, which was completed years ago. An international airport would expect to be completed in 4 years, and expressways connect the province, the southern key economic zone together, and make the zone become smaller. In the future, there is more bridge to be built from the port that can get Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu not only to the southern key economic zone, but can get directly and quickly to the Mekong Delta, and which means they can go directly to Laos and Cambodia through railway or river networks. The economic zone has been, the government see the importance of the southern key economic zone already, and they are a connected zone, but a new infrastructure just keep them closer. And let's take an example, the role of the southern key economic zone. For example, we in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, we have an international seaport. The raw material, which is very heavy, can be transported domestically in Vietnam or from overseas to Vietnam via the port. And then the basic material will be processed, will be manufactured in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu. And then the raw material will be delivered to the manufacturer in Bình Dương, Đồng Nai, Ho Chi Minh, for example, to be assembled. And then those goods, the finished good, can be consumed in Ho Chi Minh City or go back to Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu to be exported overseas. So the few province of the southern key economic zone handle the whole economy's function. And and actually, and another advantage is that Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu has another unique feature is that like it has the foundation for heavy manufacturing for basic material. Like we have like many ports, we have power supply, freshwater supply, and also because of the history in developing oil and gas in the last 30 years, we have a lot of like marine industry, marine engineering that meet international standard. And especially this year, we have a very important project in Vietnam, which will be completed in Vũng Tàu, which is the Long Sơn Petrochemical. It's an oil refinery. It's expected to be completed this year or early next year. And after this project, it will create a lot of material for Vietnam. So like firstly, it can reduce the reliance on Vietnam on imported petrochemical. It increase the domestic content, and we can control the price of input material, stabilize the market, and we expect an influx of investment following up with that. So the petrochemical will be the input for downstream industry to be invested in. And we expect a new influx of investment from next year. And another thing is that make Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu special is that it's a very rare city in Vietnam that they develop both heavy manufacturing and tourism at the same time. You don't see two things in one place. That's why Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu really care about environment. So they don't want a trade-off between manufacturing and tourism.
Well, I have to confess, I've been to Vietnam quite a few times, but I've never been to Vũng Tàu. As we discussed at the outset here, I'm planning to visit first ever trip to Vũng Tàu. I'm looking forward, number one, to seeing you in person, both in Ho Chi Minh City and hopefully in Vũng Tàu as well. But there's obviously a lot of direct ties to us. One of our important corporate partners, Ostel, has a wonderful shipbuilding facility there in Vũng Tàu. One of the leading companies here in Western Australia, the CBH, Grain Growers Cooperative, has a collaboration with Interflower and Intermalt there. I understand Blue Scope Steel's there. There's just a lot of things that are going to be really interesting. But I have to confess, I'm also interested in the tourism. So let me ask you another specific, very important question. If I go to Vũng Tàu, what is the one Vũng Tàu food specialty that I must absolutely eat when I go to Vũng Tàu?
Vũng Tàu is a coastal area, so obviously seafood. People come there for seafood. But there is a specialty that everyone come for. It is a unique food. It's called bánh khọt. It's a small fried cake with shrimp on top. It's a bit hard to explain. I will invite you there when you get to Vũng Tàu.
All right, so I will post pictures of that on the Perth USAsia Center social media page after I've eaten that. I will
Sure.
ask a follow-up question too. Obviously, I know that Nuc Mam, the Vietnamese fish sauce, there's many different areas. Does Vung Tau have their own special version of fish sauce as well?
Yeah, they have some big trend about fish shot there. Obviously, actually, like Vũng Tàu, we start first a few hundred years ago as a fishing village. It's just start with three fishing village all around Vũng Tàu, and fish is our specialties. So yeah, we take the fish for fish sauce as well.
Well, I'm getting hungry, and I can hardly wait to visit. So look, let's finish up with a big picture question. You mentioned at the outset that obviously this coming year, Australia and Vietnam celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations, and under the new Australian government, Southeast Asia has been a very important emphasis already. Our Foreign Minister Penny Wong has visited Vietnam, has had her delicious pho ga. She's had it eaten there. And there's been a deep focus on Vietnam and its role in ASEAN, as well as individual countries. I'm curious as to your broader view of Australia-Vietnam relations, but also Vietnam's role in the region and in Australia in particular. How might Australia and Vietnam work together to strengthen the region, to strengthen ASEAN?
That's a very big question. And actually, like my experience was about implementing the problem, not in the policy making, implementing rather than policy making. And in my point of view, this is what I see. So the cooperation went really well in the top leader. So the two nations shake hands, have a lot of good cooperation, MOU, FTA, and but the problem I find is that like when it passed down to the implementation level, it's stuck there. So that's a very common problem, not between Vietnam, Australia, but with many countries. It's like a bottleneck. This is what I find. To illustrate this point, I would take my experience working as a specialist in Japan Next Barrio Vũng. It's a joint cooperation between Barrio Vũng and Japan. Just for example, like in the beginning, the first step, the two governments shake hands, and we have a lot of MOU, and then it passed down to the provincial leaders. So to the cities like Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu and Perth. So shake hands, and then we have a very specific action plan. And then when the provincial leader agree, and it passed down to the implementation level, the staff level, the specialist level of two countries sit together and implement that, and involve the business on case-to-case basis to have them to connect with each other and make the action plan works. This is not a popular case in Vietnam, to be honest. A lot of provinces try to implement this model, but not a lot of them become successful because like it requires a lot of effort and resources from two countries, two cities, and a lot of things happen. It needs a lot of commitment. I only take this example as an example to show like how much effort people should spend to make things work in the implementation. Because I just feel like it's a waste. We have a lot of beautiful things on top, but in the end, not many things. It's like 10-20% of that happen. It's really a waste. Okay, coming back to Australia-Vietnam relation, we see the national government have very good relation. Then we initiate a lot of things between the leader of two countries, and then we have people connect with each other. We have city cooperate with each other. But then when we try to implement, it's a vacuum there. So from both Australian side and Vietnam side, we don't have the people on the ground to really make things work. Therefore, I think on my personal perspective, I have a few recommendations to make things work. Firstly, I think like we need to invest in capacity building in the city level. I mean like like in the top government, we have a lot of people graduate from Australia. And when I studied in University of Queensland, I see a lot of government officials in the ministry. But like when it gets down to the provincial level, there are not enough people who can speak English, who know personal who know international perspective, and because and also Australia side is the same. Like Australia don't have a big population, and your organization is really lean. but like we cannot expect like like less people and make things work. Um, um, and because there are not enough people, therefore I believe that we should invest people who can make things happen. And secondly, capacity building doesn't happen overnight. We can wake up and the next morning we have a lot of people capable to do that. So I really advise that like we should focus on really unify and specific agenda. And we may do like what we are doing by Vũng Tàu. We may select one or few province or specific agenda, make it happen, and scale it up, multiply it, replicate it in other cities to build a system. And finally, I think like Australia have a very good advantage in Vietnam, which is you have a lot of Australian graduate like me. Like it's the biggest community. I think it's contribute to like 40% of international alumni in Vietnam. That's a really big resources, human resource for you. And like because like we study in Australia, we understand Vietnam perspective and Australia perspective. We can help to people align each other. We are like sympathizer and supporter of Australia, and actually Australian government really sees that as an asset. In the last several years, they invest a lot in building a network of alumni here. But I feel like it's really focused on research and education. And I believe the business community should leverage this network more to take a head start in Vietnam. And we call it soft landing, to help you transcend the different, to understand the locals and how to do business in Vietnam. This will be a lot of help to Australian business.
Well, Ho Thai Binh, you are extremely inspirational because you seem to be the living embodiment of all three of your recommendations, right? Personal capacity building, kind of working together to implement specific projects and then scaling them up. And then obviously, of course, focusing on taking advantage of the Australian educated community in Vietnam. Thank you so much for this conversation. You've made me all the more excited for my upcoming trip. We appreciate your service as a 2022 Indo-Pacific Fellow, and on behalf of the Perth USAsia Center, thank you. We look forward to future meetings and future collaboration between Australia, between Vũng Tàu, between Ho Chi Minh City and Vietnam more broadly. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Thank you, Perth USAsia Center, for these opportunities.